of the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Republic of South Africa, and Center for Science and Environment. We extend very warm welcome to all of you for joining us today for the 7th Global Forum of Cities for Circular Economy workshop here in Johannesburg. Today we are joined by government officials from 18 African countries, and very shortly we're going to be joined by Honorable Deputy Minister, the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. We have the Director General of Center for Science and Environment, Dr. Sunitha Narayan, with us already on the dais. I will now try and present a very brief context, a little bit of GFCCE's journey so far, and also share the objective of why we are here and what we are going to do between today and tomorrow. So as we all know that the crisis that we are all having to deal with regard to solid waste management is humongous. As you can see on the screen, that it is an estimation that waste generation in sub-Saharan Africa is going to increase by 300% by 2050. So the current generation, it is a data from 2016, published by the World Bank. From 174 million, we are going to reach 520 million by 2050. And right now, about 70% of all the waste that we produce ends up in the dump sites. And there's very little recycling, about 6.6%. This is a Pan-Africa data, and the rate of composting is less than 1%. Now, waste collection has been a matter of traditional challenge. We had discussed this issue even in the previous GFCCE meetings. So when we say more than 70% of the collected waste end up in the uncontrolled dump site, it also has a connection that it is just about 55% of the waste that we produce is actually what we are able to collect as we speak. The situation from one country to the other could be different, but by and large, this is where we are today. There is hardly any data on waste management operation. So the data that I'm sharing with you are all estimations based on some studies here and there, and mostly statistical extrapolation. Now, a little bit of GFCCE's evolution when we started thinking that how do we communicate the urgency of addressing this challenge, this burgeoning crisis of waste management. And when we were thinking, we thought that it is very difficult for a civil society organizations like us to address it alone. So we thought, let us reach out to the countries who are already affected, and let's see whether there's a buy-in or whether they want to come on board and create a collective forum to take this agenda forward. So we started our effort in 2021, and CSE was able to communicate the need to collectively address the burgeoning waste management crisis that was leading to irreversible environmental damage as well as proving to be a serious economic threat. And we managed to have 9 countries agreed, and with them only we did the first GFCCE meeting in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, back in July 2022. Now, that community slowly grown in magnitude, in its reach, and currently we have 22 nations on board. When I say nations, they're essentially all government representatives, because we believe that the real change will happen only when issues are addressed at the policy level, and then the mandate goes down to the regional and the local administration for getting that reflected in implementation. But today, this community has 22 member states, which is a matter of pride, and we have achieved it together between 2021 and now. Now, why this community? What it is going to help us to achieve? So this is a common platform where we can all come together, discuss our challenges, discuss what opportunities, discuss what others are doing, and how we can learn from them. And this community has tremendous capability. I mean, having known most of you even personally, I know that collectively we can do research, we can do provide technical support, and we can also present evidence-based advocacy. Because when you engage into advocacy with any decision maker, you need to have evidence. And those evidence can only come from research. For research, there is no way CSE or DFFE can go to all countries and collect all the data and produce reports. We all have come together in the past. There are a series of reports that we have already published, and those reports have been extremely critical to give us the direction and identify what is the right practice and how do we replicate it. The third is the importance of capacity building. We all know that capacity building always enables right decision making. So we need to know, we need to equip ourselves with the right skills, right knowledge, right understanding of the technology, make things inclusive so that we gradually move from a linear approach to a circular approach, because that is the world order. Waste is no longer waste. I am sure when Sunita ma'am is going to deliver a keynote address, she's going to talk more about it. And the biggest advantage of this community is that whatever we do, it can be amplified very easily within the community and with the help of the members in this community, even beyond the community. Now, GFCC's journey, it's fascinating that we are meeting here for the 7th time in a row. We met in July 2022, then the same year, December, we met again in Dar es Salaam. Then for the 3rd GFCC, you all traveled to India and you interacted with the Indian practice. So India made a massive turnaround from 2014 onward, when Honorable Prime Minister Modi not only created a huge momentum, but India allocated till now, the budget allocation that India made in the national budget is $34 billion US just to improve the sanitation scenario. So following that, we met again in November 2023 in Accra, Ghana. In February 2024, again in Dar es Salaam. Then last year, August in Eswatini, Eswatini. And for the 7th meeting here, we are in Johannesburg. And we have been able to arrive at a set of common agenda. That common agenda may have to be reviewed. This is exactly what we're going to do tomorrow and today. Because it's important that we know that these are the agendas that we have to address. Now, the priorities may differ from one country to the other country. So colleagues are absolutely free to reorder or reprioritize their priorities and then work towards that to address. So the other 4 countries that are part of the GFCC but not part of this event is the other four neighbor of India. They're all Asian countries: Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. And very soon we are going to be joined by colleagues from our countries from the southeastern part of Asia who are also affected as much as we are. Now, the objectives of the GFCC and the agenda for this event is just a summary. You all have your copies. So we are going to review the progress that we have been able to make country by country on the common agenda. And you all have submitted a very comprehensive and exhaustive report which details out your progress on the common agenda. You have also proposed new agenda to be included in the list of common agenda. You have identified your national priority that, okay, there are the common agendas, but this is what my government wants us to focus. So we will discuss them all. We'll also learn from the good practice. As a matter of fact, you all have helped us to put together a compendium of good practices, and that good practices compendium will be released today by the keynote speakers, and later on we'll distribute all the printed copies of the report with all of you. The world is going through a process led by the United Nations Environment Programme, which is to arrive at a legally binding instrument to address plastic pollution. So now the narrative of plastic pollution has been shifted from waste management to the problem of plastic waste in its full life cycle, starting from its production to the disposal. And that transition is right now going on. We have recently completed the 5th round of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meeting in Busan, South Korea, where Honorable Deputy Director General Ma'am was there. We had the opportunity to speak to her and discuss about how do we organize this event like this. And thanks to her, thanks to the entire department, the minister, all the colleagues We have been working very hard for the last couple of months or more to make it happen, and it is happening today. So there are many issues connected to the Global Plastic Treaty, like just transition. How do we reduce plastic pollution? How do we identify the problematic and avoidable plastics? How do we finance plastic pollution, which is very, very burning issue as we speak. There are many different instruments, and we'll discuss about what India is doing, what the other countries are doing, the extended producer responsibility, the principle of polluter pays, how we can use it to implement things in our own country. This time, we are also going to discuss to understand what is the situation of wastewater management and fecal sludge management, something that I requested Dr. Sunita Narayan to discuss with all of you. So we'll have that discussion tomorrow. It's not part of the larger agenda, but it is just kind of a beginning of a conversation to understand how all we are placed and what we can do going forward as a community. The next issue is absence of data. It's featuring in the list of common agenda. We hardly have data to talk about the gravity, the magnitude of waste management problems. Even India was suffering from the same problem, but we have managed since 2016 to introduce a system that gives us a report card for each and every urban local government. And remember, India has 4,500 of them. Okay. And last but not the least, this time we have thought that as the community has grown bigger, it has 22 member states. So we have to create an institutional mechanism within the community so that the working committee or the institutional mechanism takes the agenda forward, where CSE will continue to play the role that it has been playing. So that is basically what, in short, what we are going to do. Before I leave the floor to Dr. Sunita Narayan and request her to deliver the keynote address, we are expecting Honorable Deputy Minister to arrive this place anytime sooner, but she has only desired that we shouldn't delay the process. So we'll start the process, and before I invite Sunita ma'am, let me just very quickly introduce her. She just hates me doing this thing. She doesn't want to be introduced this way, but I'm just doing by the format of the event. So Dr. Sunita Narayan is currently the Director General of Center for Science and Environment. She's a global environmentalist and writer with 4 decades of work. Dr. Narayan joined Center for Science and Environment in 1982, and remember, this was 5 years before the Indian Ministry of Environment was born. CSE was born 5 years before that, and has been playing a significant role in building public opinion on environmental challenges, particularly in the global south. She successfully combined science-based evidence with a pro perspective to mainstream environmental concern in public policy and society. She believes that environment and development are interconnected, and sustainable development requires inclusive and equitable growth. Her contributions to building a sustainable environment have been recognized with accolades like the Presidential Padma Shri Award by Government of India, the Stockholm Water Prize, Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation Award, Order of the Polar Star, the Edinburgh Medal, and many, many more. She has authored some iconic books like Not in My Backyard, Excreta Matters, Why Should I Be Tolerant, Conflict of Interest, etc., that are still referred by practitioners across the world. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. I'll just quickly load up your presentation.
So firstly, let me just join Atin in saying just how thrilled we are to be here. And thanks for the collaboration, for the partnership. We are really grateful for the amount of effort that the department has put in to help us to organize this in South Africa. I'm delighted to be here. It's not my first trip, but every time I come, I just feel at home. So thank you so much for doing this. And thank you also for the entire community of people who are in this room. I have met you, many of you. You have also come to Delhi. We have been in touch now over this period. And I think what makes this real is the journey together. It's very clear that none of these issues that we are talking about in our world are going to be easy. They're not a switch that you can switch on and switch off. It's not possible to talk about waste management as just an exercise where trucks are going to come and take away the waste and magically everything will disappear. It doesn't happen. It has not happened in the rest of the world as well. So let's be clear, when we look at many parts of the Western world and we go there and say, oh, their cities are so clean. They are so remarkable that they have managed to clean their cities. You know, the one reality check we in the South must always have is that no, it is only about visible cleaning. And always my example is, look at climate change. They may not have the kind of toxic air pollution that we have in our city of Delhi, but the fact is the sheer number of vehicles that they drive on their roads adds to the existential crisis of climate change. So you have outsourced your pollution. You have not got rid of it. And that's important for all of us to always keep in mind, because there's always a sense that, you know, we just haven't got it right. We can't get it right because of the sheer system that was manufactured that doesn't work for us. And I think that's the lesson that we have learned and that we have shared with all of you. And today, with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries, and the Environment, and in particular, I would like to recognize the Deputy DG of the department who has played such a key role in helping us to do this. I think we need to understand that this is an opportunity for us to do things differently. And I say this particularly when there is tumultuous, huge changes in the world, including what we're seeing with the coming of Donald Trump. I think it's important for us to recognize that for countries of the South, we're going to have to make our world different. And we're going to have to own our world more. And I think that's what comes out to me as I look at also an issue of waste. And let me then sort of give you a quick idea. I have spoken about this in the past as well, but I hope that some of the colleagues who haven't heard this will find this useful. And also I feel that it's something that we have to keep reiterating, because the journey that we have, as I said, the steps we need to take, there is no textbook for it. And the textbook we are writing today. And that's the important part of the journey of waste management that we have. Sorry, I'm losing the, always forget the high-tech stuff. So the Global Forum, and I won't get into that, but Atin has made this wonderful presentation to give us an overview of why this forum. And I just want to reiterate a single point that circular economy is not a buzzword for us. It is a practice that makes waste into wealth. It reduces litter. So for us, why we came to the issue of circular economy is not because it was some fancy word that came out of the Western textbooks. It's because we in our societies have always been a frugal societies. We've always taken whatever we used and turned it back into some amount of reuse. We lost it. I mean, I grew up in the city of Delhi, and I know we've always grown up with clothes which have been handed down. We've always grown up with textbooks which came through the different classes. We've always saved the paper separately, the bottles separately, the tin separately. We've always had an informal sector which collected this, which valued it and made something out of it. We never recognized it, because we came up with this notion that waste is going to be the government's problem, and that One of these days, magically, it's going to disappear because trucks are going to come and take it away to a landfill, which we don't know where it is. So for us, when I talk about waste management and our journey in India and our learning from all of you, there is one central message that I want you to remember. The reason we are doing this is that for us, if a system is not affordable, if a system is not inclusive, it can never be sustained. So for us, the issue of equity and sustainability always goes together. I find this always unique for us because when I discuss this with my colleagues from the Western world, for them, equity is about a politics. And it always comes after the technocratic solutions that you choose as environmentalists. So you say, no, as an environmental manager, I have to choose technocratic solution. But for us in our world, the politics of equity, the politics of inclusion are so much part of the management system that we work out. Because the bottom line is, if it is not affordable, inclusive, it cannot be sustainable. So, I talked about this. I'm not going to reiterate it, but and all of you in this room know, garbage is a problem. It is a health problem. It adds to the economic burden of city municipalities. It is adding today to the marine contamination of our oceans. So we are in this room because we recognize the need to find solutions. We're not in this room because we just, this is not a problem for us. It is a problem for us. Some more than the others, but it is a problem. The one lesson that we have learned is that this will only get worse if we don't address it today, because as wealth increases, garbage increases. So we are on a journey of well-being, and I know that our countries aren't get wealthier, economic growth is going to happen. But in the model of economic growth, the one thing that we have to recognize is that the mountains of garbage will increase unless we have a way of dealing with it. There is another lesson that as we get wealthier, the composition of waste will also change. And the composition is important because what is waste and how the characteristics of waste decide how you will manage it. And the fact is that in poorer countries, in less economically affluent countries, waste is largely an organic fraction, biodegradable waste. So if you didn't do anything about it and you even threw it out, it would degrade. But as you get more and more economically advanced, the composition changes. This is just between South Asia and OECD countries. But from the data that Atin and all of you contributed, I put together this fascinating chart. So this is in the report that will be released. It is data that all of you have helped us to put together. Just look at this. Whether it's Eswatini, whether it's Addis, whether it's Maputo, whether it is Ethiopia, whether it is Accra, Nairobi, Kigali, Dar es Salaam, Kinondoni, Kitsi, Lusaka, Harare. The blue is what you need to look at. There is the biodegradable food fraction of the waste. And you will see in all the cities, and these are a range of cities, some richer, some poorer, but the fact is in all of them, even now, the biodegradable fraction is anywhere between 40 to 50%. It's going down. In most cities, it would have been 80%. It's going down because the fraction of what would be bottles and glasses and tins and metal and plastic and paper and packaging waste is going up. But still, the biodegradable fraction is large. And I particularly was very interested when I saw this and I put this together just for us to understand how we have to approach this challenge. Because when you look at the blue here, or even the green in the case of Lusaka, just because it's food waste, but it's the same blue. If you look at the blue here, this is a waste that is not waste. This is actually the easiest part of our waste journey. Because this waste is a biodegradable fraction which comes out of food, which comes out of all the other things that we have in our households. And if we were to separate it out, that's 50%. It's already gone out of our waste stream. And this really what has taught us the biggest learning, and this is the toughest, and I'll be very clear. I call this the Achilles heel of waste management. Segregating, something that seems so simple that we need to sort out, but yet it's not just sorting out at the household level, it's sorting out the trucks which collect the waste. It's a sorting out of the processing centers which will receive the waste. It's a methodology that we need to carry from beginning to end. But the fact is, and the good news is, and this is good news, I know that it should tell us that we're not rich enough, but actually being rich doesn't mean that you have to drown in waste. And so there must be another definition of being affluent and rich without saying that we're going to just have a lot of waste around us. If half the waste is biodegradable, it's wet, it's messy. That's the problem with it. But if you separate it at source, look at the opportunity you have for composting. And now today, some of the Indian cities, which I love, are now practicing what is called bio-CNG. They're taking this wet, compostable fraction of the waste and making gas out of it, which they're using to run their buses, city bus fleet. But the trick is, it has to be separated. It has to be wet, compostable waste, not mixed with the dry, the plastic fraction, because then that waste becomes waste. If it is separated, it is a resource. If it is mixed, it is waste. And that is the most important lesson that we have learned. And I know over this journey with you, many cities are working at this. It's not easy, but you are working at this because this is the make or break of the waste management system that we are talking about. So given this, we have all talked about and we have worked on this. This is not something new for many of you, but I want to reiterate that the current strategies which are designed to just collect and transport to landfill sites will have to be revamped and revised. And the reason again is going back to the first question I had, the politics, that if it is not affordable, it cannot be sustainable. And in our case, it's very clear. The landfill sites I've visited with my colleagues in many of your cities, it has the same problem that we have. The landfill sites are always out of the city because that's where land is cheap. You're not going to get a landfill site in a Tony neighborhood. You're going to put it where land is cheap, it's far away, out of sight, out of mind. Okay? Now that means your cost of transportation is high. By the time you collect and you transport the waste, mixed waste, the recyclers have to then go in and sort the waste at the landfill sites. Most of the landfill sites then have poor communities, and the only reason we're not drowning in waste is because of the poorer communities in our countries, which still go out and make that waste into a resource. But if we could do that in a way that we don't have to build the landfill, then you're creating a totally different system. One of the things that we have not been able to, that the Indian government is talking about, but we would like to see happen, and we've been asking for this for the past few years, is that put a tax on landfill. Right now, the policy is, and I think that would be the same in most African cities, we have something called a tipping fee. So you pay to tip your waste into the landfill site. Now, this means that there is a perverse incentive because people want to load their trucks with a lot of heavy material, in most cases, mixed stones and construction, demolition waste, because the heavier the waste, the more they get paid for. The more uncertain the waste, the more they get paid for. So what we have been asking for is that revise this policy, move it from a landfill tax to something that you have to pay to deposit the waste at a landfill. And the reason is that we are also too poor to waste land for waste. So for us, the first agenda really is waste is a resource. I think the Honorable Minister is here. I can see her. Wonderful. Let me just go up them. And you're right here with me. Hello. Thank you so much for coming. So happy you're here.
Good morning, everyone. You may be seated.
No, you can some time, then we will get you back. So as I was explaining, Minister, we were talking about the imperative that we have in our part of the world. The first principle is that waste is a resource. Do not waste waste. We need to recycle, we need to reuse. The other argument that I would have is that we are too poor to use land to dump waste. Land is at a premium. I know in Africa, we have these images of vast areas of land. But it's not true. We have high population densities. We have people who live near the land, near the landfills. So we cannot afford to waste land for waste. And the third principle is that we have to build sustainable and safe livelihoods from waste processing, reprocessing, recycling. And that's where I began with saying that for us, the idea of circular economy is, the word may be a foreign word, but the idea is ours. We have to take ownership over it because we as nations have always believed in frugality not being poverty. We have always believed in the principle of reuse and recycling. We just have to bring it into the way we do our city management now. So as I said, you cannot waste land for waste anymore. This is data in terms of how much land. Again, this is all data. I would imagine this has increased, which is open dumping, land that is used, landfills that are used in Africa, across the continent for waste. I started with this and I want to reiterate it, that if we want to do reprocessing, make wealth out of waste, then segregation is critical. And I hear a lot in our part of the world, and I'm sure you do as well, where people coming and telling you, oh, don't worry, just send the mixed waste to us. We will segregate it at our site. We will have these separate sorters and people who will do it. Please, 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 please take my word for it. I have been to just about every one of those facilities, and I can tell you it doesn't work. Because it is impossible to sort out the waste once it is mixed. And that's the question about the value that you get out of it. So segregate becomes the mantra. It's also important because I know that a number of countries are looking at waste to energy plants. There's nothing wrong with it. Theoretically, you're essentially taking the dry fraction of the waste, and which has a high calorific value, and you're turning it into energy. So say, in theory, nothing wrong with it at all, and definitely a policy and a strategy that can be adopted. But please remember again that this only works if the waste is segregated. Because if it is not segregated and you're putting mixed waste into the incinerators, you actually have poor quality of fuel. If you have poor quality of fuel, you cannot have good energy. So yes, you're burning something, but you don't get the energy that you want out of it. But more than that, because you're burning mixed waste, you're actually making sure that you have more emissions. So yes, you may not have the emissions that are all over that are burnt, but you're concentrating the emissions at the waste to energy plant. So this becomes very critical also to understand that any value addition that we want to do with the waste stream requires us to be able to sort and segregate. And that is best done at the household level. After a lot of learning in India, the Indian policy actually has moved now towards rewarding cities towards segregation. So when we started, Minister, the first time the Indian government launched, we have a ranking of cities based on cleanliness. And the first ranking that happened, Minister, was on visible cleaning. So you go to a city and you say, oh, the streets are very clean, and they have transported the waste. Slowly, the learning came that if you transport the waste, you're just moving the waste from one place to another. You're not dealing with the waste problem. So now, increasingly, and this was a big change that came out in 2021-22, where now cities in India are rewarded based on how much waste they can segregate, minimize, and process. And I'm not saying that all cities of India have got there, but as the minister will agree with me, the government direction of policy becomes very critical. So the government of India is pointing cities towards saying, we will recognize you not on visible cleaning, but how much waste have you actually reprocessed? And that becomes a key way for more learning to happen and more cities to do this at scale. The second agenda, which is now becoming more and more biggest, is the big problem of plastics that we have. As I began, Minister, I was explaining that, and maybe I can just take you to this one. One slide which we put together, so what we did, Minister, is all cities that we got data from, we put together what is the composition of waste. And what is fascinating is if you look at all cities, they're all the blue in the pie. It shows you how much of the fraction is biodegradable. Now, I would argue with you that biodegradable organic material is not waste. It is actually a resource that can be composted, and now today in many Indian cities is actually being used to make gas out of to run vehicles. But for that, the key rule is how do you make sure that that wet waste is separated from the dry waste? And then we come to the dry waste. Okay, so if I'm looking at the dry waste, the issue really is plastic. It's gone up. I mean, as Atin explained, and he didn't give my age to all of you, but as you probably have guessed, I'm really old at this. Okay. But, you know, when I was at the Rio conference in 1992, and in fact, Minister, I was here at Joburg for the 2002 conference when we celebrated 10 years of the Rio conference as well. At that time, if you remember, plastic was not on the agenda at all. We basically believed that the problem had been dealt with, that the world had found answers to it. It had either buried it or it had shipped it to faraway lands. If you remember all the scandals that happened and the Basel Convention was agreed upon only because there were these vast shipments of plastic that were being sent off to shores outside. But it was a problem that most Western countries thought had gone away. But today it is in our oceans. It is refound in our oceans. The problem did not go away. You know, there's something about the Hindu religion, Minister, which is very interesting. So for us, we have two gods. We have many gods, but we lose sight of how many gods. But we have two critical gods. One is the God of creation, and the other is God of destruction. What is very interesting is for us, the God of destruction has a higher ranking than the God of creation. And I really have always argued that's because the whole value that you give, you must not make materials that cannot be destroyed. And if you look at the world's environmental problems today, it is because of those man-made, and I'm not going to call them human-made because women had no role in this, materials that today have created a problem. Look at TTT, persistent organic fluorine, which ended up with today talking about that it was so persistent that it entered the shells of birds and the entire bird population was at risk. Then came the whole issue of CFC, the ozone hole. Again, why? Because you have a chemical which was seen to be a wonder chemical because it would not get destroyed. And then, of course, the plastic. It's a wonder chemical, wonder material. Why? Because it has a long life. And that really is where the plastic problem is today, back in our lives, back in our world. And we need to address it fast because we can't make it just go away. We have to find strategies that work for us. Now, in this, we need to understand the politics of recycling. Because at least in our part of the world, industry is very powerful and they essentially end up with telling you, oh, don't worry, it's not a problem, we'll just recycle it. And yet, why is it that every time we go to a landfill site, and we have data in this report from the Dar landfill, where every time you go to a landfill, you find so much plastic. So why is it that that material hasn't been collected by the people who had manufactured it and recycled it? Because there is a problem. And that's why we need to understand recycling really works when it has a value. It will be collected and it will be processed. Two, it works because in many ways, and this is the brutal truth of it, we have large numbers of poor communities who are bearing the cost of recycling. They collect it, they shred it, they melt it, they pelletize it. There is a business not of the formal sector, but largely of the informal sector. And that is something that we have to recognize, and as a policy, we need to work on it. Because if we don't, the poor who are so much part of the waste business today, they are the strength of the waste business, not its problem. And that's what we need to recognize. So what has been the learning? In this again, no rocket science, fundamental learning is separate dry from wet so that the dry can also be reprocessed. But here there are three other quick lessons we have learned. One, we need to ban what cannot be collected, which is why many countries, many cities of Africa have been very successful in the ban on carry bags. Because that was a micron of plastic which was not possible to collect. The quantities was not possible to collect. So it made sense to ban it. But what is the alternative to it? That's what many cities are also struggling with. What do we mean by biodegradable plastic? Is there anything called a compostable biodegradable plastic? Those are questions that we are looking at. We should learn from each other. But the other part is we need to start banning what cannot be recycled. Something that we are struggling with, but honestly, you will need to ban multi-layered plastics. Plastics which come in all our packaging material, which cannot be recycled. There's no value in that recycling of that material. That's what you find the most when you look at all the landfills. And then, of course, we need to promote the recycling by informal sector. And in addition, and I know Siddharth will talk about it, we need accountability accountability mechanisms to hold companies responsible for the plastic waste that they generate. And how do they take it back and what do they do with it? It's a tough journey, but all these elements will be part of our management of dry waste. The third agenda is an agenda we have spoken about. We will be discussing it further today, but in recognition of the informal sector, a deliberate policy recognition of the informal sector in the waste management business. And in my city of Delhi, the first time waste management became an issue, government hired concessionaires to take away the waste. And they thought that would solve the problem. It really didn't. Because not only that, you marginalize the poor communities who were doing your waste management. So we need to find policies to promote it, to reward it. And my last point is something that I'm very passionate about, is the celebration of NIMBY, not in my backyard. When most of us, I come from Delhi, Minister, and all our landfills are on the outskirts of the city. And when the landfills get built, those places have very poor communities who live around it. And they don't have the ability to fight back and say, no, don't build this landfill here because it's going to affect me. But now it's changing. And most Indian cities cannot find now a greenfield landfill site. The most fascinating fight for me, and where I began my waste journey, is in the extreme south of India. We have a state called Kerala. And there is a city there called Thiruvananthapuram, which is the capital of that state. Very literate state, very politically empowered state. Women there are particularly very strong, have played a huge role in the politics of the state. And a story came out of there that the city, the capital city, was not able to send its waste to the landfill site, official landfill site, because the woman leader in the village where the landfill site was based said, over my dead body. You are not sending another truck from the capital to my village. I am not accepting your waste. You will not believe this. This fight went up to the highest court of India. And what is tragic is that the highest court of India ruled in favor of the city over the village, because the court said that this is an established landfill site and the city has the right to send its waste to it. But what is remarkable is not a single truck has gone to that village after that, because people in the village have said no. Now, what did this do? This changed the middle class urban city of Thiruvananthapuram to start looking at its waste as well, because they could no longer dump it somewhere else. So it changed the entire politics of waste management. That's what's powerful in the concept of NIMBY. The NIMBY of the past, not in my backyard, was run by the rich of our cities. I mean, I have not seen a nuclear power plant in the backyards of any of us. I have not seen a thermal power plant in the backyard of any of us. We could always establish, NIMBY is a word which was not in my backyard because I'm rich, I'm powerful to say no. But today the NIMBY is becoming the NIMBY of the poor. And I think, and it's a tough message, because every time I give this to a similar group of policymakers in India, they come back to me and say, no, but it's our right to make that. And I say, no, celebrate it, because it's the NIMBY of the poor, the environmentalism of the poor, which will teach the rich to do things differently. If you don't do that, you will become part of another part of that very, very poor environmental story, which is today leading us to climate change. So what then is the final best practice that we have learned and we are talking about? One, cities which have the best practice have integrated waste with their community, business organizations, with, in our part of the world, we call them self-help groups, with rag pickers. they have built a sustainable livelihood model. And they have deliberately planned for segregation of waste. So when it comes to wet waste stream, it's compost. You can do it decentralized or centralized. And you can do biomethanation, the bio-CNG that we talked about. When it comes to dry waste, it's a ban on single-use plastic. It's recycling and the use in other ways like road construction. So this becomes the overall chart. This is actually from the Government of India's own policy data, which was 2021, establishing what then would be the routes for waste management. And you will see landfill comes absolutely at the end, only when you have a fraction of the waste which cannot go anywhere else. This is the policy that we need in every city, which is that we will take this only when there is nothing, no other alternative, and the last fraction goes to the landfill. So cities, CSE's work, and all of you are partners in this, has been to do the research, to nudge change by documenting best practice. We really believe that the way to bring change is to document what is happening on the ground, to learn and to amplify that learning. The forum Atin has spoken about, but the minister, the aim of this forum, which is a real South-South forum, is to share this knowledge and to learn from it, and to do this by building capacity, by doing study tours, by looking at where are the policy gaps, what can be done to improve it. But the most important part of it is to celebrate our learning and keep discussing the way ahead. We haven't reached that last end. We're always on our journey. So today and tomorrow, the agenda is to come up with where are we now and where do we go next. That's part of the conclave. Finally, we need to keep this in mind. Every backyard must be a front yard. Because if the waste is not in my backyard, then it is in my front yard. And the way we manage our waste is to turn it into a resource. So this really is the fundamental learning that we have in terms of waste management. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for all the partnership and all the work that we are doing together. Thank you. The minister's taking a call outside. So maybe, Atin, I can take a few questions while she comes in. She's taking a call, I can see. Something urgent. The life of a politician is very different from all of us. I do not envy them at all. So any quick questions to me before the minister comes in, and then we will take her. Yes, and can you introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Thanks, Salim Aida, Director Waste Management in Cape Town, Western Cape Government. Thank you, Doctor, for the keynote speech. I agree with most of what's there. This is one of the key things in terms of that turnaround. A lot of our systems is already currently in place, and the cost of flipping it is going to be quite exorbitant. And how do we take that journey forward in terms of moving it around completely? Even the collection of segregated waste becomes a bigger expense. And also in terms of the whole mindset change of getting all the organics out, getting that segregated, the systems that needs to follow becomes a little bit tricky. Maybe if you've got any advice on that, thanks.
You've hit the nail on the head. I mean, that is the problem. I mean, there are two levels of, if you look at most cities that are in this room as well, Cape Town and Delhi would not be part of the changes that you can do quickly. The best is when I see newer, smaller towns as they are growing, they don't have to make the mistakes, and I will call it a mistake. I'm sorry, Salim. I will call it a mistake that Cape Town and Delhi have made, which is to develop this very centralized collection systems. And they're not workable for most cities. So first lesson is, don't let them follow us. That's the first thing. And that's important because big cities become role models. So what happens in Cape Town is what every other city will aspire towards. So the first thing is to break that, to say, this is not a model that we need to emulate, that there is a different way of doing it. And I believe the innovation that can be done in smaller cities is enormous. But then to go back to Cape Town, and I will go back to Cape Town, I've seen Cape Town, I have some idea of what you're dealing with. I would argue with you, there are still opportunities. And I'm saying this also from, say, okay, you can't remove your centralized systems for transporting the waste. But if you were to insist on segregation at source, you could do things differently for taking the waste and reprocessing it. And one of the big rules, one of the learnings that we have is that how do you promote segregation? Because that's the big issue. So the best cities that we have seen to promote segregation is when the waste is not collected every day. There are different days for collection of dry, and there is different days for collection of wet. So this, I'm talking about big cities like Delhi and Cape Town, where Delhi is struggling. I'll be very frank with you. I mean, I would be embarrassed for you to come to my city right now. We're struggling. I'm sure we will get it right, but we are struggling. But clearly, the opportunity still exists. So I do believe that the principle is very critical. That, I mean, if you take your waste to a landfill site and it's unsegregated, it's just waste. And then you leave it to the poor rag pickers, and I've seen them in many of the landfills across different cities of Africa. They have to go there and rummage through the waste and pull something out of value, which they do. But it's not the best way to be able to manage the waste. So I think we should really think about how we can work and what we can do to find the step-by-step journey for a city like Cape Town as well. You did it with water. You did it with water. I came to Cape Town, you know, I went to Cape Town when you had day zero in Cape Town. And I was in Cape Town when literally every signboard said, do not wash your hands. Do not flush. That drown is okay. I mean, I was like, ooh. Maybe this is the future. You did something. So I think it is possible for big cities as well. It's just the approach that we take. What is the approach? What is the step? Ministers here, wonderful. I was explaining to everyone the life of a politician is not easy, and none of us want to be in your shoes. Please.
Thank you so much, Angie.
All right, colleagues, we are truly honored to have Honorable Deputy Minister of the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Republic of South Africa among us. She has struggled a lot to get here from Pretoria because of the traffic situation. But before I request Honorable Minister to address all of us, let me take the opportunity of quickly introducing her. The Deputy Minister, Ms. Bernice Swachh, is a member of National Assembly of South Africa with a career rooted in public service and community activism. Ms. Swachh is recognized for her steadfast commitment to social justice and economic empowerment. Ms. Swachh has a strong educational background in social science and public administration, which underpins her approach to policy making and governance. As a prominent figure in South African politics, has been a vocal advocate for gender equality, education, and community development. She has served on various committees contributing to critical decisions and legislative processes. Her insights have been instrumental in advancing legislative initiatives aimed at improving the welfare of South African citizens. Beyond her legislative responsibilities, she has actively engaged with her constituents, ensuring their voices and are represented in national dialogue. Her dedication to grassroots mobilization and community outreach has earned her widespread respect. Her work reflects a deep commitment of creating a more just and inclusive society. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. We are truly privileged to have you here. You may please address the Parliament.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and I would like to apologize for being late. It's part of the call that made me go out now. I had to make a decision whether I come here or I start at the utility house who has employed me. So I think those who understand politics will understand which decision I had to make this morning. And whether I come here or go to my party who has deployed me. So I'm very sorry about that, but I could not say that I can't come because I was called and I had to go there. And even now when I stepped out, it was a call from the same people. So my apologies for that. But thank you very much. His Excellency, the High Commissioner of India and South Africa, Mr. Rapat Kumar in absentia, the Director General Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi, Ms. Sunita Naren, Program Director for Solid Waste Management and Circular Economy, Center for Science and Environment, Dr. Etienne Luas, esteemed government delegations from our continent, representing amongst others Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, Eswatini, Ghana, Kenya, Lesotho, Madagascar, Mozambique, Namibia, Rwanda, Senegal, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor and deep appreciation that I address you today at the 7th Global Forum of Cities for Circular Economy. The Government of South Africa and the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment extend its gratitude to the Center for Science and Environment, India, for its unwavering commitment to advancing circular economy principles and enhancing solid waste management systems across the global south. We are proud to be associated with the GFCCE, which has made tremendous progress to become a unified voice in the global south in advancing circular economy models in solid waste management. Today, this forum is at the forefront of establishing a common agenda for its members and the promotion of evidence-based policy practice. As we gather, this event will be remembered as a valuable platform, enhancing collaboration and advancing circular economy principles. Research shows that cities account for 75% of natural resource consumption and 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. As more and more of our people continue to migrate to cities to seek better opportunities, it is necessary that cities become resilient on resource efficiency and reduce environmental footprint. Since its inception in 2021, the GFCCE has been a beacon of collaborative engagement and individual platform for knowledge sharing. South Africa has been privileged to actively participate in this remarkable initiative, which has significantly enriched our efforts in the waste management and circular arenas. Co-hosting the 7th edition of this forum is a profound privilege and presents an opportunity to further strengthen partnerships and drive transformative solutions for sustainable waste management, particularly across Africa. The common agenda for action, with its emphasis on policy reforms, robust implementation mechanisms, and strengthened institutional frameworks, resonates strongly with South Africa's commitment to fostering sustainable development and impactful waste management practices. This forum amplifies the essence of South-South cooperation by uniting nations under a shared vision to mainstream and integrate circular economy principles throughout the African continent. At the heart of our national efforts lies the constitutional mandate to safeguard the environment and uphold every citizen's right to a clean and healthy environment. Circular economy is critical for material supply security and sustainable economy. South Africa has thus instituted various policy instruments and initiatives to advance sustainable development pathways with circular economy principles firmly embedded in these strategies. These include the National Waste Management Strategy, extended producer responsibility regulations for priority waste streams, and other economic instruments that include fee levies and taxes to incentivize or disincentivize behavior change. Extended producer responsibility became necessary to be included in South Africa's policy mix, given the increased generation of waste. EPR seeks to shift the responsibility for products from municipalities and consumers to producers. South Africans are under immense pressure, and the host city of Joburg, together with others, do not have sufficient landfill airspace. It is necessary to utilize a policy mix to address resource efficiency. It is necessary that cities are enabled to monitor resource use. We recognize too that meaningful progress can only be achieved through strong partnerships. In this regard, collaboration between government and the private sector is paramount in realizing the goals of waste management, hierarchy, and facilitating our transition to a circular economy. South Africa remains steadfast in its commitment to strengthening these partnerships and advancing the shared objectives of the GFCCE. This collaboration benefits our governments through reduced spending and create green opportunities. Congratulations are in order to the Center for Science and Environment and the Forum on the release of the Compendium towards Circularity Good Practices in Solid Waste Management in Africa. This milestone publication is a testament to the wealth of innovative practices emerging across the continent and offers a critical resource for advancing the circular economy agenda. Your DG of India, South Africa has noted that India has vast experience in waste tire recycling and management. The team from South Africa's Waste Management Bureau are keen on pursuing technical cooperation or focusing on waste tire management. Let this workshop finalize the modalities of this technical cooperation. Delegates, as you embark on this 2-day 7th edition of the GFCCE, I wish to extend my best wishes for its success. May the discussions and exchanges during this forum lead to impactful outcomes and foster continued collaboration across our nations. Let us build on the strong foundation established by the GFCCE to realize a future that is sustainable, inclusive, and resilient. Together, we can make a lasting difference for our cities, our citizens, and our planet. Together, we can end plastic pollution and protect life in our rivers and oceans. It is time for action that will protect the environment while sustaining livelihoods and restoring the dignity of the men and women participating in the waste economy. South Africa and India share historical bonds that we must continue to tap into the resources and creativity of our people to meaningfully contribute to a sustainable future, not only for people in the global south, but across the world. This is especially crucial at a time when there are worrying signs to undermine our global commitments to creating a safer and happier planet to mitigate the devastating impacts of climate change. In the year in which South Africa chairs the G20, South Africa, through His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, will utilize the platform to advance the goal of a better world and better Africa. Will ensure that we mobilize social partners to fight the triple planetary crisis of pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss to build more resilient communities. We invite all of you to use this time during and after the forum to visit our country and be inspired by the hopes and great hospitality of our people. Before I conclude, I would like to quote that you are what you do, not what you say you will do. I thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for this inspiring address. And you did touch upon the most critical elements that the world needs to listen. Thank you so much for sharing your vision with us. It is now time to release the compendium. So the compendium of good practices, something that we have been trying to put together for about last 6.5 months. This compendium has good practices, mostly from the GFCCE community member states, essentially talking about 15 good practices from 11 countries. And if I may request Honorable Minister, my Director General and Honorable Deputy Director General of GFAP to please come and join us for the stage and release the report, and we'll distribute the copies of the report to the other colleagues as soon as the report is already there on your desk.
So, Minister, this is also part of our waste journey. Earlier on, we used to have all these packaging and all that. So now we've ended up with having an envelope with which you take it out with flourish. So I will give this to you. And so you release the report, because every time we did this, it would be going to have waste material, where does it go? And then we have this plastic around the end. Thank you. Come, Athen, please come. Please sit down.
Siddharth? Thank you so much. Thank you, honorable speakers. We will now take a small break for tea. The break is about 20 minutes from now. It's 10:40. So I request everyone to come back to this room exactly at 11 o'clock and start the next session, right? We are slightly behind time, so we request all of you to be back on time. Thank you.
আমরা ভোট পাঠাচ্ছি